I think we're on the home stretch. We have several items to cover, and I'll just give you an overview of what we're going to walk through. I apologize that we don't have the agenda for everyone. I'm going to review the media coverage that's been received to date, a recommendation that we have at the request of CDOT, the City of Charlotte's Department of Transportation, a request from Crescent Communities to consider, and then Tiffany's going to give us an update on the community feedback we've received so far. And then we will wrap up and take any questions about next week's presentation to the City Council. I hope all of you saw the Observer ran a front page piece about the work, and there have been at least several letters to the editor in response. I don't know if there have been additional ones that I missed, but I know there were at least 3. And then 3 television stations have requested interviews that I did, and I think several of you may have participated in one or more of them. WSOC, WCNC, and WCCB have all run pieces. And they also, I think, have really helped us in terms of pushing out participation on the website. I asked each of them to do that, and I think that helped drive some of the feedback we have gotten. I'm going to pause there and just ask you to comment on what you've seen or heard in the media. Any thoughts, reflections?
This is Lynn. This is not something I heard in the media. I did read the letters and saw the Observer story, but a friend of mine who lives in Plantation Estates in Matthews is telling me that they have changed their name officially now to Matthews Glen. And they're going to change all of their addresses because they all live on Plantation Estates Drive. That's not Charlotte, but, you know, it's starting to happen, you know.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, Lynn. Anyone else? Did you think the coverage, I mean, first of all, I guess I should ask, how many of you actually have seen, either read the Observer report or seen one of the news stories on one of the television stations? Okay, I think, okay. Did those, I'm sorry?
When you're done, this is Donnie.
Donnie, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of static. Tiffany, should we all be muted so we can hear Donnie better?
Yes, if everyone could mute, that would be easier.
I was going to simply add that I think the reporting to date has been very balanced. And the expected pushback, I think, you know, is not unusual, but right now it appears to be, at least out there, it's on balance, and we anticipate more feedback. But so far, so good.
Anyone else have any observations about the coverage or have heard anything in response to it? Tom?
It was interesting. I haven't seen the TV pieces. I was glad that Steve Crump, who is a senior correspondent and a fast friend of Charlotte history, that he did a segment. I've not seen it, but I was glad to see him doing it. On the Observer, I usually don't read comments, but I figured I'd steel myself and read them. And fascinating, they were all, when I read it, were all about the Walton Building, which is on Stonewall, but it was named after an African-American city council person who was also convicted of a homosexual encounter And so all the comments about street names had nothing to do with street names. They had to do with that particular building and that bit of history.
I've got to go back. I missed those. So obviously I haven't seen all the comments that came into the Observer. So Steve Crump, I didn't know Steve had done a piece. He did something on WBTV.
I believe so. I'm Facebook friends with him, and I believe that came across my Facebook that he was about to do that, and I didn't watch. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Tommy Tomlinson did his On My Mind piece about street names, or at least used it as a catalyst for this week's segment. Well, if there's no additional feedback on the street names, Tiffany, can you pull up and give the background for CDOT's request?
Yes, I'll pull up the recommendation now.
While Tiffany's doing that, is someone from CDOT on today? Kathy.
I'm here. Yeah.
It was interesting. Apparently, when I had given the update to City Council about that we were going to consider some guidance on how to review street names that were being considered to recognize a person, CDOT had a very strong reaction because typically, unbeknownst to us, CDOT sort of had the sole authority to do that and really didn't want to have that role. And so, Kathy, do you want to comment further on that and then the discussions that ensued?
Sure, I can do that, and I'll try to be brief. So, I mean, I'm just gonna, kind of cut to the chase. I was talking to my director about this, and by ordinance, the director of transportation has the authority to name streets and to rename streets, and that, that could be a nice power to have, but probably not a burden that most directors would want to have to carry on their shoulders, right? And especially given all of the work that's going into this effort, you don't want one person, and she really doesn't want herself kind of sitting in that hot seat. So, as we talked through what the regular process is, or the process that we've used in the past to rename streets and to name streets, at no point has there ever been any sort of subjective criteria applied, right? It's kind of a list of check boxes. Does it sound like another street? Is it a duplicate? Is it fewer than 22 characters, right? It's all very objective. You kind of mark the boxes. But when it comes to, for lack of a better word, appropriateness of the name, there's no screen for that, right? There's nobody testing for that or asking questions or doing any kind of research. And so when she and I were talking, we felt like that was a pretty important piece of this equation that's missing. And so what I've done is I reached out to Tiffany and Emily and asked if, as part of your recommendations to council, because it is a council, this is a policy and this is going to be council adopted, would the committee be willing to make a recommendation to add that as one of the qualifiers before we even get to the point that we send it over to the county and say, okay, we're going to name or rename this street. And we, first of all, as staff, we're just not going to have that level of expertise. You all clearly have the knowledge and the resources to be able to provide this information. And so that's sort of where we landed, is to ask for your additional and continued participation in this process.
Tiffany, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that background. Tiffany, this is not the revised language, actually. This, you know, we had a revision to this language that we said that, yeah, because,
Okay.
wait, the process
One
will,
in the email.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
I can't, that we had talked about the Legacy Commission recommends that CDOT consult with historians to review street name proposals and requests. Let's see.
Okay, let me turn this off 1 second.
This was the original, and then we said that because the Legacy Commission wouldn't be an ongoing body, that we were going to recommend that CDOT consult with historians to ensure that any individual names.
Okay, hold on.
Tiffany, my apology. We talked about it yesterday.
Hold on, let me look. I'm sorry.
And Emily and Tiffany, while you're looking at it, this is Lena, you know, to the extent anything that we propose to do causes the practice under the ordinance to be modified, we need to think through that. So maybe we need to have an offline conversation about that, Kathy, because I don't know where you and Liz are and what you're meaning or suggesting with respect to consultation versus what's prescribed in the ordinance.
Lena.
So yeah, it would, I think what we're proposing is an ordinance change.
And I think that's
And
a
I know
little bit
that
outside
that's-
the scope of where we are here. So maybe we need to have a little additional discussion about that. And I don't think we need to get into it here.
Right.
But that might be a point we need to take up separately.
Lena, I'm fine with that. We were just responding to what CDOT had asked of us, that if they wanted counsel, the Legacy Commission will no longer be, you know, functioning, so that they would, if you believe it's within the bounds of the ordinance, to consult with historians. But I mean, I'm fine with whatever. We were including this at their request.
No, understood. I just hadn't had an opportunity to think through that, or, you know, so we can have that discussion and kind of look at what the language is and see if there are any concerns there.
At that being the case, you will just simply need to let Tiffany and me know whether this point should be included or referenced on Monday or not. Because it wasn't currently in the recommendations that were approved by the full commission last time. That's why we were bringing it up.
Okay.
So to that point then, Lena, is it best that you and I and Emily discuss this, and then I can send out a revised email to the full commission once we've decided what would be appropriate?
Yeah, and if we can have someone from CDOT as well.
Okay. Okay.
And I wanted to add to that. While we call it a policy, our street renaming process, I am not certain that it is an official policy. I think it's an administrative, it's just the way that we've been doing business, which may, Lena, I mean, you tell me, may give us a little more flexibility, right? We can add it to the process, or if the intent of this group is to have a product that is an official city council policy, then we would incorporate it that way.
I think we need to take that into consideration.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can do anything administratively, basically, right? If we want to make a change, we'll make a change. And
Well, let me ask, since we're going to have this conversation offline, but I want to ask the commission for without the direct specific, I just want to make sure everyone is comfortable with the recommendation that CDOT, if permissible by statute or ordinance or policy, would consult with a historian to vet any proposed name changes. it was really not so much to, it was as much to prevent as to affirm, if that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah, Emily, this is Alan Cronovet. I think that makes sense, but I think that our recommendation, I think if we leave it to quote unquote historian, then that's going to leave a lot of interpretation to the staff as to who's the historian, what's the qualification, is it someone who's local? Is it someone at a university? So I'm not exactly sure what other guidance the staff would like from us. Is it the historian at the Levine Museum of the New South? I mean, that's or something, because I think if we just have a generic term historian, then that could lead to all kinds of unintended discussion about the credentials of that historian, all kinds of things that well intended, but we haven't thought through. So I just raised that as something for further consideration.
Sure, I hear that very much. I take your point completely. Initially, when we thought about it, Tiffany and I were, the implementation of this, it seems to me, is a decision to be made by either city council or the city manager. I mean, that it's not, I didn't really feel it was our role to be ultra specific on implementation on any of this, because implementation wasn't really our charge. Our charge was hear recommendations. Now the city council determines whether they're going to go forward with those recommendations, and how they're implemented would typically be determined by the city manager and his staff. So that's why it's a fine line. I mean, I think that, we don't, I don't know. I'm trying to thread this, walk it carefully about what is our proper role and what is not. And I take your point completely, but I don't know other people's thoughts about that.
Well, I agree with Alan on that. I think you have to have some specificity. I don't know that we need to specify who that should be, but you do want, the staff to be able to go with a name. Somebody comes in with the name of a person they want to name the street after, and they have to know, like, who is this person, and they have to check them out. And I don't know the best way to do that.
Would it be, I'm asking, and then part of this is for city staff, I mean, would it be historians designated by the city manager, by city council? I don't know city protocol or how these decisions are made, I guess.
I'm just sitting here trying to think if we do anything similar in any of our other programs or processes. I think most definitely we would want to have, a primary point of contact, like, who do we go to? And I know Tom doesn't want his phone ringing, 20 times a year. And although his name is the one that typically comes up when there's a history question in our circles in the government center. But I don't know if it's a volunteer, if it's somebody that's already on some other citizens advisory board, and where we could maybe piggyback on that. Is anybody in this group on any other kind of council advisory committee?
One possibility would be either the Historic District Commission or the Historic Landmarks Commission, and that might be a way to rope that in. I think I'm happy to have this go on as long as you want, but I think we're beyond our collective expertise at the moment. So
Okay, yeah, you're right.
You're beyond mine anyway. all good questions. Everything that's being raised is really good.
Well, should we?
Well,
This is Mary.
all right.
This is Mary. I have a quick suggestion, maybe to get us out of this little patch of weeds we seem to have stumbled into. Should we just have a suggestion that the city manager devise a simple process that might include several members of the community to meet as needed, or give them a short menu of possibilities? Because my guess is that they're not going to want to have to think it through, even to the extent that we are thinking it through right now. But give them a short menu. Appointed citizen committee, landmarks commission, somebody with expertise in local history. I mean, I think of Tom, obviously Tom and Dr. Griffin, but it's entirely possible they not be around wanting to do this in the next 10 years. So something fairly generic that includes expert in local history.
I think that's spot on, and then make the whole logistics, figuring out how that gets implemented, put that burden back on city staff, and we'll figure something out.
Okay. Well, we'll figure out between Tiffany, Lena, and Kathy, language that will express the intent, and as Mary described, give some menu of options the city manager can use. Does that sound like a plan? Everybody thumbs up on that one? Okay. Another piece that has come up since our last meeting is a request from Crescent Communities. Elizabeth McMillan, who is one of the developers working on the River District, has asked the commission to consider including their request for a name change in our recommendations. And we can send you the letter that we received overnight. Tiffany and I have both spoken to Elizabeth McMillan, and involves Dixie River Road, which is out obviously near the river. And apparently there were several high schools that were consolidated in the early 20th century and were called Dixie. And then the road was named after them. Tom, I don't know if that's correct or not, but they feel very strongly that they're working toward building an inclusive community that welcomes everyone. And they think having a main street of that development named Dixie could be a deterrent to businesses and families. So what Tiffany and I, we made no commitment. I said I would bring it to the commission. What I did say was, it seems to me that we have a recommendation that says the commission encourages and supports neighborhoods and developers who want to request street name changes. That I could cite this, that the commission supports this recommendation in the spirit of that, what we had stated previously, but I am totally open to what others think.
To me, that sounds perfect. Dixie, it was a community name, at least as far back as the early 20th century. And I don't really know how it got started, but I do know a lot of folks who lived back there or had family back there, including the Carter family. When they were on WBT radio here in the 1930s, they lived down in the Dixie community. Most of the community is gone because it was wiped out by the runway out there. And so on one level, this is not an argument to keep the name, but the name is one of the few things tangible that survives from there. So there might be some pushback or some sadness. But I think it's a great idea to do exactly what Emily just said.
And I'm pretty sure that Mel Watt grew up out there. I have a memory of him saying he grew up in Dixie, and I'm going, where's that? So I do think there was a historic community there, and it was not a historically all-white community. And I think throw this ball back to the developers, you know, and I think there's also not going to be a whole lot left of it anyway. But it's just a little factoid that we might want to remember.
So, Mary, I'm sorry, what are you saying? You would support including this as an example or not?
I would support the language that says new developments consider naming and renaming, and let them figure out whether they want to wipe out. I mean, developers love to wipe out historic communities, so they may not blink an eye at it. But there was a community there, and I think there's still fragments of it there. And whether we want to totally rename it or not is, you know, a question. I would guess Mel Watt would be okay with renaming it, but I think we need to just think about that. That's more, and to me, Dixie is one of those. It's been such a widespread name across the South. It's kind of like plantation. I think it will phase out, but also I think we may be opening a can of worms if we say, and Dixie's on the hit list.
I think that they want it on the hit list.
Mhm.
I understand.
Oh, the developers do. Yeah, I'm sure the developers
are having
do.
a hard time getting support to get Dixie dropped from. They just want it to be the River District, but the developers are having a hard time getting Dixie dropped, and they were hoping that this commission could hopefully assist with their effort to get the Dixie portion of the name removed from that development area.
Why are they having a hard time getting the name dropped? Who's opposing it?
Emily, you may know better than me from your conversations, but I believe just going back and forth between the county, the line is not just in the city limits. It goes from the county. It extends beyond the city into county, which is not a city jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's a part of it or all of it is under state and county jurisdiction, but the River District, once its form is going to be annexed, then it will be part of the city. So then it would be under city control. So I don't understand. Lena, you may know better than I. I didn't understand all of her explanation, but Lynn, what were you going to say?
Well, I was thinking, we've got about, 50, 60 of these other names, slaveholders and Dixie and plantation and this and that. And I don't know that we will necessarily ever want to recommend changing all of those, but I would say when a neighborhood or a property owner or people come to you and say, we want to change our name of our street, I think, because we think Dixie is something that's not, say, just not inclusive, then I don't see a reason why we wouldn't, support that. I mean, it may not be something we're going to go out and do overall, but this, I'm not even sure. This request is a little strange because it almost seems like they could just go through the normal process of changing it, but you say they're getting all this pushback. So they think,
well, it's not from the city.
It's from the county, the state. Yeah.
Well,
pushback. That's right.
What, Tiffany? I'm sorry.
You're correct. The city has not given them pushback on this. It's just outside of our jurisdiction.
Emily, this is Mike Sullivan. I do commercial real estate, and I think that if we're not cautious here, we're starting to get into perhaps individuals that have a different motive. Not that their motives are not positive or good, but their objective is to make money. And I think if we're not careful, we are definitely getting into an area that perhaps will gray our intention or at least our charge.
Okay. Let me ask you this, since I will be speaking. Do we want to keep that recommendation? Because it seems to me, the recommendation, Tiffany, I don't have it in front of me, but the recommendation says the commission encourages and supports neighborhoods and developers who request street name changes. So do we not want to, Mike, I'm just saying, if what you just said, are we keeping that recommendation? Because as we said, we endorsed, the whole group gave thumbs up to that recommendation. I guess the way I could thread the needle, this is what we had said. The supports, encourages the efforts of neighborhoods that petition. You know, so I mean, if we're not going to support that, that's okay. But we're saying two different things, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Emily, I think
what I can say.
The recommendation itself is sufficiently broad, and I think that's fine. I think maybe Mike is warning against specific developers, or we wouldn't want to be necessarily on the record advocating for one more than any other. But I think the recommendation as it's worded is fine, and it still gets back to this question of how the city, through its implementation and enforcement process under the ordinance, would take that into consideration if it's for an existing street name, as Dixie River is, or if it's for new street names going forward. I think the jurisdiction question gets a little more, and maybe Kathy or someone will know more. There may be portions of it that are in the city limits, portions that are in the ETJ, the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city, and then there may be portions that are controlled by the state, by NCDOT. So I think that might complicate a street that meanders in and out of the city.
Okay.
That's exactly what we're faced with on some other.
So let me ask. I want to accurately reflect the will of the full commission. On Monday night, your recommendation is that I read that and make no mention of any, whether it's Plantation Estates, whether it's the River District, or to say that these are ones that are up for consideration, or just leave it alone. Don't say anything about anything in specifics.
Just a correction. Plantation Estates is in Matthews, and it's actually I guess they've already cleared whether they need to clear to change their street names.
I mean, they're a private developer. I think we talked about that. I mean, but I'm really just asking, just make that recommendation with no comment about any current changes.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, Emily.
Go for it.
Okay.
Well, and I know nobody asked, but I would just interject, and Lena, correct me if I'm saying something out of turn. I think the
Hey, what's up?
The understanding on our end is that this commission is going to make recommendations for a policy moving forward, but the real prescriptive kinds of things that need to happen at the staff level end up becoming our project to work out after council's recommendation. Is that a fair assumption?
I try to be careful not to assume anything, but I think the commission is making recommendations to the council, and then it will be up to council whether or not to adopt those recommendations. And if they do adopt it and develop a policy as a result of it, then I think it trickles down, and we have to think through what's the existing authority we have for what we need to do in order to carry that out, and if there are any changes that need to be made, including possibly ordinance revisions. And so that's the piece that I was trying to touch on. But I think generally, yes, I think certainly the charge of the commission is to make recommendations, including, for example, this one with respect to consideration of future street names.
Thanks. You just said it a lot better than I did.
No, I'm fine. I will just make the recommendation with no mention of any examples within or without the city's jurisdiction. Tiffany, I'm sorry, are we ready for the feedback, or was there another item? I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda.
No, I can move forward with the feedback if there's no other comments.
Let me just see one thing. Yeah, sorry, I'm working. I have a new phone and I haven't quite figured out all the bells and whistles on it just yet. Yeah, so community feedback, it is going to be compiled through through Sunday. And so I will be reporting out whatever we have heard through that, or a high level through that point. Tiffany is going to give you sort of some summary findings to date. And then I received just about an hour ago some of the actual comments, and I've scanned them really quickly, and I can give you the flavor, and then they will be sent out to you shortly. But I think Tiffany, I'll let you go, and then I'll add my commentary from what I've gathered quickly.
Sure. So, and I know this is kind of smaller to read. I'll try to blow it up. But what you're looking at here, the first data point that we got information from is from Nextdoor. So in this column A, you'll see where we broke it down essentially by area. These are the Nextdoor areas that we have here in Charlotte, and you'll see the total number members of Nextdoor here. But what you'll want to pay attention to is basically on, we did a poll for them, yes or no, if they agreed with the Legacy Commission's proposed recommendations. We of course have a link, but just to get a quick poll from the Nextdoor members. And this is where we stand here, this pie chart here, based off the responses we've received. We received 4,433 responses. Of those, 54.48% were no, we do not agree with the proposed recommendations. 45.52% said yes, they do agree with the proposed recommendations. Some areas you'll see a higher level, southeast areas, you'll see a higher level of percentage of no's than some of the more areas that we typically call the crescent, but I hate that term. So, so you can kind of see a breakdown of where the areas are significantly a little higher for a percentage of no's and a significantly higher for a percentage of yes. And I will send all this data out to you after this meeting so you can glean through it. I'm not going to ask everybody to do a vision test. But I just wanted to have everybody have a general idea of what we've heard so far. For us to have been just south of a week getting this kind of response is pretty incredible. I will say that typically we do not always have a lot of response, considering also this is all online, right? We have no ability to have go door to door and get campaigns, which is typically how we're a little bit more successful. So I will pause there just so everyone can glean at this Nextdoor data, and then I will go into what we received actually from the website on those submissions.
Just a kind of a procedural question. Does the Nextdoor option restrict people from voting more than one time?
No, it does not. We do not have that. And we don't have a way of it's like a poll. So it's not like they're not asked to put like information and that sort of thing, versus like when they, I will say the same thing on the website. They're not restricted. If they wanted to go in, 30 times and respond, they could definitely do that. So we have not restricted that.
Curious.
I will also say that this work, it's not unusual for it to be kind of split, pretty gray. I mean, these are tough conversations, and people are typically pretty polarized. They're either going to be overwhelmingly yes or overwhelmingly no. And so I think you'll see that that's what's here reflected on this quick poll from Nextdoor.
Tiffany, why don't you put up the one from the website now?
Sure. So from the website, can everyone see that Word document?
Well, the website, everybody, we can see the pie chart now.
Yeah, so this is the summary of all the website responses. And so this is exactly probably the inverse, where the percentage of yes based off of the website responses are 54.86, percentage of no are 43.67, and this is based off of 547 responses from the website. And there were some yes, no's, that's that 0.55%. So we had about 4 people say yes and no. I'm assuming these are maybes. And then we had 3 people with blanks saying, I'm sorry, 5 people with blanks, 3 people with yes, nos.
I really, as I said, I've just had a few minutes to scan the responses. But I really welcome your feedback after you've had a chance to read through the comments. The reasoning for the no's is really interesting. There are some that just flat out think it's a horrible idea. There are others who that reflected in some of the letter, one of the letters to the editor, that if we need to keep it up as a reminder that we learn from history and we don't want to repeat it, there's that theme. And then there's the theme of, we shouldn't be spending our money on this. There's a lot more pressing problems. I mean, there's a lot of those ideas that this money would be better spent. Then there are those that are just the feasibility. Why are you creating this hassle for people on those streets? So there's and I didn't have time to sort of tally but there is a wide range of views about it. I mean, there's the interesting thing to me is both, I would say, from a majority of people who both support our recommendations and at least my quick glance, most of the people even who oppose believe that we need to learn from history. So I think that it raises some interesting questions about our recommendation about what the city should be doing to disseminate more broadly history, and if the city applies for a Mellon grant, what should be created to spark that educational role for about learning from our history. So I know that this isn't ideal. Hopefully, it would have been much better had we completed the whole data set before we had this conversation. And I know you don't even have the comments, but do you have any initial thoughts about how we should position our work, or how the frame should be to council, or just any observations? But the one thing I would say, as Tiffany said, reading through it, the comments really do reflect polarization. That's not unexpected given the state of the country. But.
And I'll also add that, yes, you are correct. And I think one of the things about the feasibility of the street name changes really weighed heavily on a lot of respondents. So I don't know if that's something that this commission wants to consider when we were talking about the rollout of this, or for council to consider. But the feasibility seems to be while they may understand and want street name changes, just going through that process does not resonate well with a lot of people.
Having said that, I think we're really characterizing the negative. There are enormous number of comments saying, thank you for this work. It's about time. I've just moved here, and for the first time I feel affirmed as an African-American woman. I live in Druid Hills, with next to so there, you will see both comments, both it reflects very different views of history, I would say.
Tiffany, I have a question. I noticed that there were much greater number on Nextdoor as compared to our website. How are we getting the information out to folks? I know that I received a link and I shared it through Charlotte East and some other social medias, but what is the overall approach to get that information out to the folks who respond?
That's a great question. So we've done focused emails like that through a lot of our boards, commissions, groups that are that we partner with Charlotte with different initiatives. So we've done email blasts, and then we've done social media campaigns. It's pinned on all of our meeting information. It's on our homepage when you go to charlottenc.gov. And so we've been just trying to push it out as much as we can virtually. We did not do mailers because it's typically it's a little bit more complicated to do like a mailer in the water bill. But we relied heavily on networks for email distribution and really partners within the city to really push out the link to respondents. Nextdoor was easier, frankly, because it was a poll. So we invited people to go to the website to give more in-depth responses, but we tried to tease you, if you will, with Nextdoor so you could, get an idea of what was going on and read through the recommendations. Also understanding that the responses are lengthy, right? So a lot of people took a lot of time to craft really strong responses. So that's been our initial campaign. We continue to push it out through all of our social media networks, and we'll do another Nextdoor push next week. I'm sorry, we're in next week. Today's Wednesday. It'll be this
Yes.
week. I'm sorry.
This is the week.
This is the week. I apologize. So it's a balance between oversaturation and then, can everyone hear me? There's a balance between oversaturation and then and getting it out sufficiently. So we're hoping we continue to be successful.
Tom?
I don't know whether this would be possible or just too much work, but where you do have data on whether folks are in favor in principle, that might be worth breaking out of particularly the negatives that what you're telling us. It'd be great if we could see it, that there are folks who are against and there are folks who are in favor in principle and have qualms about implementation, have qualms about priorities, and I appreciate your saying that. And anything we can do to make that visible, I think would be really good.
Okay.
Would it be possible?
Go ahead, Alan. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, would it be possible for private foundations or the Foundation for the Carolinas or private donors to provide the funding to alleviate the concern about the expense related to it, create some sort of fund or something?
I don't know. I mean, again, that's
outside this.
Yeah,
group.
that's outside. I mean, again, that's a question of implementation. I mean, that, I mean, the interesting thing, I mean, some of the criticism is really not, I mean, some is directed to the commission, but some is directed to the city for, why are you doing this? I mean, it's a, where they're directing those who really don't like the work, they're directing their criticism in different places. I mean, I think that what we need to do is focus on what we were charged with doing and explain how we did it and why we did it and make the case for it. I mean, I think that all of that remains the same. And I think, I actually think there are things to be drawn in terms of our overall recommendations, as I said, from people who both oppose and it's interesting to me. There's no way to do this because we obviously don't have the set. In some ways, there are people that are objecting to street name changes that some of them I don't think would have been, some would, I'm not, this is a supposition, but in some ways, street names bother people more than had said you were going to move a monument in some ways, because they're saying, no, maybe not, that street names are just like wallpaper and nobody pays attention, and why are you bothering kind of thing. So anyway, there's a lot for us to digest, for sure. And I do welcome your feedback and giving me your thoughts so that I can synthesize and reflect, the impressions from all of us. I also really want to say that I hope that all of you, if you possibly can, will join the City Council meeting next Monday. Because of one, I would like to thank and recognize you publicly, and I think that the mayor and the city council would like to do the same. And I think that you may be asked to comment after our presentation. So for all those reasons, I very much hope you will be on the Zoom. Tiffany, do we know anything more about where we are on the agenda?
We have not changed. We are still on the third item on the agenda.
So we could be very late. So if you sign on, have something else you can do and have dinner, and because I have a feeling it'll be a while if we're third. Okay.
Can I just speak to the issue about the street names and how some people feel like that's not, as important? I was watching one of these newscasts where they went to interview people that lived on Jefferson Davis Street or Jeff Davis Street, and they knew exactly who Jeff Davis was and felt kind of a relief, at least from the interviews that I saw, that was going to change. It's one of these things that's like where there's this like sense of history about the name that they understood. They might not be historians or whatever, but they lived on a street and they understood the meaning of that name for them in those interviews. And to your point, that I think that everyone regardless of what side of the issue that they fall on, they seem to all value history. Mm-hmm. And so, which is something I found in finishing up this book I've written about Confederate monuments, is that there is this agreement about we value history, but it's what the history is. Mm-hmm. and how they perceive it. And I do think that there is an opportunity for history education around this issue if we can get everybody on the same page and learning the same history and not the lost cause version of it. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Thank you, Karen. Other thoughts or reactions? Anyone?
Go ahead,
Tom?
Tom.
Oh, wait. Tom?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate moment. In the final report, Osmond Behringer's first name.
I'm sorry, you froze.
When you're.
Tom, you froze. We couldn't hear you. Tom, you froze. We couldn't hear you.
It looks like his internet connection may have gone out. He has an arrow, so we'll give him a couple minutes.
And as long as we're doing, can y'all hear me? This is Mary. As long as we're doing little corrections, Liz Hare's first name, Elizabeth, is with an S, not a Z.
Okay.
Hi, Mary. To confirm that the Liz is L-I-Z, right? The nickname?
Yeah, L-I-Z, but her, I actually checked with her obituary just to be sure, and I was pretty sure it was an S, and it is Elizabeth with an S. But Liz,
thank you.
With a Z.
I'll make that correction.
Thank you, Mary. Tom, are you back?
I thought it was something about Behringer Street, but I couldn't hear the rest of it.
Yeah, something about Osmond. Tom, we couldn't hear you. You're on mute.
I apologize for whatever happened there. Osmond Behringer was what I was trying to say.
What about it? I'm sorry.
In the report, he got an A in his name accidentally.
Okay.
So it's
And O-S-M-O-N-D.
Yeah, thank you.
Got it.
Thank you.
I'll make that correction. I apologize.
Willie, are you on the call? I'm sorry. I see your name now.
Yes, I'm here.
I don't know where you came into any of these discussions. If you have any comments or thoughts.
I've been listening. I came in at the tail end. I think I came in about 15 minutes ago. I had a problem trying to locate the email. It was in my spam. But generally, I think in terms of the feedback from the audiences, I thought it was really surprising, particularly when you said that a lot of them, well, you know, I think Karen had the same sentiment that most of these people care about history. And I generally think, and I've said this, I've tried to remain neutral throughout this whole process, but I think that history is a roadmap in many ways. It's a roadmap and it's a compass. It tells us how we got here and it tells us where we are. And to erase a lot of the names, I think I understand both sentiments, because I think as a historian, we understand that history can be written from a number of different ways, and you just have to find ways to bring these narratives in conversation with one another. So it's a complex topic, a complex issue, you know. So I mean, I really don't have much else to add. I think I've expressed this at the outset, and yeah, it's interesting.
I'm going to add, this is Tiffany, and Dr. Cox, you can probably speak to this more than we can. When we were comparing ourselves to some of the peer cities that are engaging in this work, a lot of them did not go down to the street level, right? A lot of them had monuments. So that's one thing to consider when we're looking at how other cities engage in this effort. A lot of them had monuments, and when those were either changed or they stayed or whatever, but it was a check mark. And so they typically did not go down to street level just because it is, there's a lot of layers to it. So I do want to recognize that this is not easy work. So I commend everyone's commitment to this process, because in some ways it might have been easier to have a monument, right? Because then you can just address that one thing. And we're really addressing an entire system. So it might be worth noting when we're explaining this process to persons that that is the difference between a lot of our other peer cities in the South and the work that we're engaging in currently.
Didn't Atlanta deal with street names?
They did on a small scale, but they did not have a high level of community feedback. I think they only got less than 20 comments. And so city council did not feel like, their city council at the time did not really go into, I think they changed a couple and did co-street names and that were extremely problematic in their views. And then I think they just changed them to be co-street names, which is what a lot of streets are like that in New York. They have duplicative names. But we currently do not have duplicative names here in North Carolina.
Well, to be honest, as this issue evolves, it will evolve beyond monuments anyway, into things like markers and, street names, highway names, and things like that. So in some ways, this is I think this commission is providing some good leadership on the issue.
I agree.
Any final thoughts?
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
This is Sylvester here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I've been playing tic-tac with the great WebEx from the city of Charlotte. Thanks, Tiffany. So if I go off, I'm going to speak real quickly. I put a couple of Facebook posts up, and Dr. Henches saw them, and we got a couple of very interesting feedbacks. And this afternoon at about whenever WCCB comes on, I'll be interviewed by Morgan, whatever the last name is, Fogarty or whatever. And I complimented everybody on the board, your great leadership, and of course, everybody else. I told them we had outstanding historians like Tom and Dr. Willie, Dr. Tom, And my basic thing was reconciliation. I wasn't going to let her pin me down about the work we were doing. I simply said we were asked to do it. We had documentation as to why there might be some concern that these streets might be unfavorable to some of the citizens of Charlotte. And at the end of the day, the voting electorate should go voice their opinions respectively, and it's going to be up to the 11-member city council and the mayor to decide where it's going to go. And I concluded by talking about reconciliation, that street names and everything else are fine, but in this day and time, we got to come together, all people, all Americans, after what we've been through this year. And I think it'll come through very favorably, but that'll be on at WCCB at whatever time that evening news comes on today. So just want to give you that shout out.
Thank you, Levester. Appreciate it very much.
Sylvester, you want to come work at our communications department? You can.
Listen, I am 71 years young, and I respect the coronavirus. Mr. Bug and I are not going to become friends until I'm not coming out.
Hey, Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worthwhile, but I mean, I think I say this in my section of the report, but you know, African American citizens had no say in it whatsoever. And so when we now that we have an opportunity, you know, to do that, and it's a far more representative approach to these, you know, to the landscape of Charlotte. I just think it needs to be pointed out that, you know, you are taking the temperature of every, you know, as many people and as a diverse a community as Charlotte is, in a way that wasn't done in the early 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that reminder. That was in the initial update, you know, that it wasn't a democratic process, that it was a very small group and it included no African Americans. So maybe that point needs to be made once again. It was not a democratic process, you know, so, but thank you for that reminder. I had begun to think about my presentation, but I really wanted to wait to get feedback and to hear from the commission today before I really shape it. So I really do, if you have chance today or tomorrow morning to review all the feedback and then send me your thoughts, it'd be really helpful. Fanny, I see you've just joined us. I'm not sure when you joined, so do you have any reflections or thoughts you want to add? I can't hear. We can't hear you. Sorry.
It looks like she may be having some connectivity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes. I'm sorry, Fanny, we can't hear you. You must be having connectivity issues. One thing I would say to that point about everyone that we can hear and we can't hear, when you Tiffany, I don't know how to make this possible. If you would send your comments to Tiffany and me, and then Tiffany will compile them, and we want to share the full range of feedback from the commission with one another.
Sure,
I mean,
I can definitely do that.
You know,
and
so
after this meeting, I'll send everyone just where we are the full download of all the responses we've received. So in your free time, I'm sure everyone has a ton of free time right now, right here at the holidays, right? If you want to glean through that, so you have an idea of what the feedback has been so far, and so you'll have that, and then you'll get another update next week with that final push.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. This has been quite a learning experience, and I've learned so much from each of you and the historians. Just a major shout out to Dr. Griffin, Dr. Cox, and you know, we will see where the city council takes it, you know, what they decide to do. I really underscore, I hope you will be with us, because my sense is there was a lot of discussion just after the update, and I suspect there will be a lot of discussion and Q&A about the recommendations. And, you know, it would be great to have you there, and they may call on you to comment as well. So I you know, really hope you'll be there next Monday. Tiffany, did you have something?
Sure, just logistically, like I have a list already of persons who've responded, but if you need to be added to that list, if you're would like to attend and you're able to attend, and the meeting coordinator will send out the WebEx link for that meeting on Monday. So I'll make sure she has all of your contact information so that all of you can be on the WebEx for Monday. And this point of personal privilege, I just wanted to thank Emily for her leadership. This is my first time ever being a staff resource for this type of work, and so I appreciate everybody's flexibility in a time when we had to be 100% virtual. First time and 100% virtual, so that's something. So I just want to appreciate so I appreciate Emily and her leadership and helping me and guiding me, and I thank each and every one of you for your commitment to this work. It does not go unnoticed how much time and commitment it takes. So a huge thank you from my humble self to all of you.
And a huge shout out to Tiffany. She's been the best. She's absolutely the best. Well, anyone have any final comments before Monday? Please send written comments to Tiffany and me, and you know, look forward to seeing you Monday.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.